Chapter 1. The Moon at the Edge of Memory. There is something about the moon that has never quite settled into the background of human awareness. It hangs there, night after night, familiar and yet impossibly strange. We see it so often that we forget to wonder about it. But when we pause, when we truly look up at that pale disk suspended in the darkness, something ancient stirs within us. A feeling, perhaps, that we are in the presence of something far older and far stranger than we have been told. The moon has been with us for as long as human memory reaches back. It has witnessed every breath of human history, every civilization that rose and fell beneath its light. It has watched over prophets and poets, lovers and wanderers, all of whom looked up and wondered what it meant. And yet, for all our gazing, for all our stories and songs and scientific missions, the moon remains, in some fundamental way, unknown to us. We call it a satellite, a natural companion to Earth, born from some ancient collision in the chaos of our solar system's early days. This is the story we tell ourselves, the explanation that makes sense within the framework of modern astronomy. And perhaps it is true, but there are details, small and strange, that do not quite fit. There are numbers that align too perfectly, coincidences that seem to defy the randomness of cosmic chance. There are stories, very old stories, that suggest the moon was not always there at all. Some have wondered whether we have been looking at the moon the wrong way all along, whether the assumptions we carry, so deeply embedded in our understanding of the sky, might need to be questioned, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, not to overturn science, but to stand at its edge and peer into the spaces where certainty fades and mystery begins. This is not a story about conspiracy or hidden knowledge. It is a meditation on strangeness itself, on the quiet peculiarities that surround our moon, the anomalies that have puzzled scientists and storytellers alike. It is an invitation to drift through the questions that linger at the boundaries of what we know, to explore the possibility that the moon, that constant companion in our night sky, may be more mysterious than we ever imagined. The moon is exactly the right size and exactly the right distance to perfectly cover the sun during a total eclipse. This alignment is so precise that it creates one of the most breathtaking phenomena in all of nature. And yet, it is an alignment that should not exist. Not with such perfection. Not in a universe where planets and moons are scattered at random distances, in random sizes across the vast darkness. The moon stabilizes Earth's tilt, giving us seasons and climate patterns that remain steady over geological time. Without the moon, our planet would wobble chaotically, making complex life far more difficult, perhaps impossible. It has been said that the moon acts as Earth's guardian, a silent partner in the long story of evolution. But how did this partnership come to be? Why does the moon perform this role with such exactness? When Apollo astronauts left seismometers on the lunar surface, they recorded something unexpected. When rocket stages and other debris were deliberately crashed into the moon to measure seismic activity, the moon rang like a bell. It reverberated for hours, far longer than solid rock should. Scientists from NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, noted this with interest and some puzzlement. They proposed theories, adjustments to what they thought they knew about the moon's interior. But the data remained strange, lingering at the edges of explanation. Ancient texts from cultures scattered across the world describe a time before the moon. The Greeks had stories of the proselyns, people who lived before the moon appeared in the sky. African oral traditions, South American legends, and forgotten mythologies hint at the same impossible memory. A time when the sky was different, when the night held only stars. These stories are often dismissed as myth, as the confused imaginings of people who did not yet understand astronomy. And perhaps that is all they are. But myths are strange things. They carry echoes of something, even if we can no longer hear what it is they are trying to say. This narration is not here to persuade you of any particular answer. It is here to walk with you through the mystery itself, to linger in the questions that surround our nearest celestial neighbour, to wonder, as people have wondered for thousands of years, what the moon truly is and why it is there. We will drift through the impossible coincidences and the ancient voices. We will explore the geometry that governs the sky and the hollow moon hypothesis that emerged from seismic data. We will stand on the surface of imagination and look back at Earth, considering what the moon has given us and what it might still conceal. Outside your window or somewhere beyond the walls of wherever you rest tonight, the moon is there, perhaps full and bright, casting silver light across the land. Perhaps a thin crescent, delicate as a whisper, or perhaps hidden entirely, new and dark, waiting to return. It is always there, turning slowly around us, holding its far side forever away from our eyes, always present, always watching, always mysterious. Let us begin then beneath its quiet light. Let us drift into the story of the moon and into the questions that have followed it across the long arc of time. Chapter 2. The Impossible Coincidences. If you were to design a moon for Earth, to place it in the sky with intention and purpose, you might choose the exact dimensions and distance that our moon possesses. But we're told that moons are not designed. They're accidents of gravity and collision, random debris from the violent early days of planetary formation. They appear where physics places them, in whatever size and shape the chaos of the cosmos allows. And yet our moon appears with a precision that whispers of something more than accident. The most striking of these coincidences is the one we witnessed during a total solar eclipse. The moon is approximately 400 times smaller than the sun. By a matching coincidence, the moon is also approximately 400 times closer to Earth than the sun. These two ratios cancel each other out with mathematical elegance, creating a perfect alignment. When the moon passes between Earth and the sun, it covers the solar disk exactly, revealing the sun's corona in a spectacle that has moved humans to tears and wonder for as long as we have been here to witness it. Astronomers have noted that this alignment is temporary on cosmic timescales. The moon is slowly drifting away from Earth, receding at a rate of about 3.8 centimeters per year. In the distant past it was closer, and total eclipses would have been less perfect, the moon covering more than just the sun's face. In the distant future, it will be too far away, too small in the sky to completely obscure the solar disk. But right now, in this narrow window of cosmic time, in the exact era when human beings have emerged to contemplate the heavens, the alignment is perfect. Some have called this coincidence remarkable. Others have called it troubling. A few have wondered if coincidence is the right word at all. There are other moons in our solar system, dozens of them, orbiting the gas giants and the outer worlds. None of them create perfect eclipses from the surface of their planets. None of them match the mathematical relationship that our moon shares with the sun. The precision we experience is, as far as we know, unique, a singular occurrence in our corner of the universe. It has been suggested that perfect eclipses may be rare throughout the cosmos, that if intelligent life elsewhere looks up at their own skies, they might never witness the delicate corona of their star framed in darkness. They might never know that particular beauty, that specific alignment of celestial mechanics and wonder. But we do. Here, on this world, we are given that gift. The moon's orbit presents another curiosity. It is nearly circular, far more so than most moons in the solar system. Moons tend to have elliptical orbits, stretched and irregular, pulled into eccentric paths by the gravity of their planets and the influences of other bodies. But our moon travels in a path that is remarkably smooth and round, maintaining a fairly constant distance from Earth as it circles. This near-perfect circularity contributes to the stability of Earth's axial tilt. It is one of the reasons our seasons remain predictable, why our climate has been steady enough for life to flourish and evolve over billions of years. A more elliptical orbit might have introduced chaos, wobbles and variations that would have made the development of complex life far more difficult. The moon, it seems, arrived with exactly the orbital characteristics needed to be helpful. There is also the matter of the moon's size relative to Earth. In our solar system, moons are typically much smaller than the planets they orbit. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn, despite being numerous and impressive, are still dwarfed by their parent worlds. But our moon is unusually large. It is more than 1/4 the diameter of Earth, making the Earth-Moon system less like a planet and its satellite, and more like a binary planetary pair, two worlds dancing together through space. This large size is part of what gives the moon its gravitational influence over Earth. It is why we have tides, why the oceans rise and fall in rhythm with the moon's passage overhead. It is why the moon can stabilize our planet's tilt with such effectiveness. A smaller moon would lack the gravitational presence to perform these roles. A larger one might pull too strongly, creating instability rather than balance. The moon once again is exactly the size it needs to be. And then there is the matter of the moon's rotation. The moon turns on its axis at precisely the same rate that it orbits Earth. This phenomenon, called synchronous rotation or tidal locking, means that the same side of the moon always faces Earth. We never see the far side from our world's surface. It remains hidden, turned forever away from our gaze. Tidal locking is not unique to our moon. Many moons in the solar system are tidally locked to their planets, their rotations gradually slowed by gravitational interactions until they settle into this synchronized state. But what is unusual is how quickly this occurred with our moon. Scientists have calculated that tidal locking typically takes a very long time, billions of years in some cases. Yet the moon achieved this state relatively early in its existence, as if it were always meant to show us only one face. Some have noted that this locking creates a kind of division, a near side familiar and mapped, the surface we have watched throughout all of human history. And a far side, unknown until the space age, mysterious and different in its geology. The far side has a thicker crust, fewer of the dark basaltic plains we call maria or seas. It is as if the two hemispheres of the moon were formed with different intentions or under different conditions. Why this difference exists remains unclear. Theories have been proposed, models have been constructed, but the asymmetry lingers as another quiet anomaly in the moon's character. There is one more coincidence worth noting, though it requires stepping back and looking at the moon not as our familiar companion, but as an object in space with measurable physical properties. The moon has a lower density than Earth, much lower. Earth's density is about 5.5 grams per cubic centimetre. The moon's density is only 3.3. If the moon formed from material ejected from Earth during a massive collision, as the prevailing theory suggests, we might expect it to have a density closer to our planets. But instead, it is lighter, composed of less dense materials, as if it came from somewhere else or formed under conditions different from those that shaped Earth. Scientists have explanations for this, of course. They propose that the moon formed from the lighter, outer layers of Earth, or from the impacting body itself, which may have been composed of different materials. The theories work, more or less. But the numbers remain just slightly unexpected, another detail that does not quite align with the simplest version of the story. Taken individually, each of these coincidences can be explained. The eclipse alignment is a temporary accident of orbital mechanics. The circular orbit is a natural result of gravitational settling. The large size is unusual but not impossible. The tidal locking is physics following its inevitable course. But taken together, they create a picture that feels less like randomness and more like arrangement. A moon that is the right size, at the right distance, with the right orbit, locked in the right orientation, appearing at the right time in Earth's history, to witness perfect eclipses, and to stabilize a world where life could grow complex and aware. It is enough to make one pause, enough to make one wonder if the word coincidence truly captures what we are seeing when we look up at that pale, perfect disk hanging in the night. Chapter 3. A Time Before the Moon. There are stories, very old stories, that speak of a world without the moon. They come from places separated by oceans and centuries, from cultures that never knew of each other's existence, and yet they tell remarkably similar tales. They describe a time when the night sky held only stars, when the rhythm of darkness was unbroken by any lunar presence, when the Earth turned beneath a sky that we would not recognize. These stories have largely been forgotten, dismissed as the confused myths of people who did not understand the permanence of celestial objects. We assume that ancient peoples simply did not grasp that the moon had always been there, that their creation myths and origin stories were attempts to explain something that needed no explanation. But the persistence of these tales, their appearance across such vast distances and disconnected civilizations, suggests something more than simple confusion. Perhaps they remember something we have forgotten. In ancient Greece there were accounts of a people called the Proselenes. The name means, quite literally, before the moon. These were said to be inhabitants of Arcadia, a mountainous region in the heart of the Peloponnese, who claimed that their ancestors had lived in that land before the moon came to circle Earth. The Greek philosopher Aristotle mentioned them, and later writers preserved fragments of their story, though always with a note of skepticism, always with the understanding that such claims stretched the boundaries of believability. The Proselenes were said to be an ancient race, the earliest people of their land, who passed down through generations the memory of a moonless sky. According to the fragments that survive, they believed their lineage predated the moon's arrival, that they were witnesses to whatever event brought it into being or brought it to Earth. Apollonius Rhodius, the Greek poet and scholar, wrote of a time when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens. He suggested that there was an age when the moon did not exist, when the celestial order was incomplete, and he was not alone in preserving such references. Other classical writers, drawing on traditions even older than their own, hinted at the same impossible history. Across the world in South America, the Tiahuanaco people near Lake Titicaca told stories of a moonless age. Their legend spoke of a time of darkness and cold, before the moon rose to light the night and bring warmth to the world. They described the moon's arrival as a gift, a turning point in the story of the Earth, the moment when the world became fully itself. In the ancient texts of the Assyrians and Babylonians, there are references to a time when the moon was not yet appointed to its place in the heavens. These references are brief, fragmentary, embedded in cosmologies that also speak of gods and divine interventions. But beneath the mythological language, there is the same underlying claim. The moon was not always there. African oral traditions, passed down through countless generations before being recorded, contain similar echoes. The Zulu people have stories about a time before the moon, describing it as an egg brought to Earth and placed in the sky. Other African cultures speak of the moon's arrival as the end of an earlier age, a transformation of the world from one state to another. These stories present a problem for our understanding of history. The moon is believed to have formed roughly 4.5 billion years ago, shortly after the Earth itself came into existence. Human beings have existed for only a tiny fraction of that time. Modern humans emerged perhaps 300,000 years ago. Our civilizations, the ones that created written records and preserved oral traditions, are younger still, no more than 10 or 12,000 years old. There is no way, according to our current understanding of both astronomy and anthropology, that humans could have witnessed a moonless Earth. The moon was ancient long before we arrived. It predates not only humanity but every form of complex life on this planet, and yet the stories persist. One possibility is that these myths are purely symbolic, attempts to describe the creation of order from chaos, the establishment of the cosmos as we know it. Many cultures have creation myths that involve the separation of earth and sky, the placement of the sun and moon in their proper positions, the organization of time and season. Perhaps the pre-lunar myths are simply part of this larger pattern, a way of saying that there was a time before order, before the world was complete. But myths are strange repositories of memory. They preserve things, even when the meaning has been lost or transformed. They carry forward images and ideas that feel important, even when we no longer know why. And sometimes, buried within their poetic language, there are details that suggest they might be pointing towards something real. Some researchers have wondered if these pre-lunar myths might preserve a memory of some other celestial event, perhaps an asteroid impact that filled the sky with dust and blocked out the moon for months or years. Perhaps a dramatic change in the moon's orbit that made it appear different, larger or smaller, or in a new position. Perhaps some atmospheric phenomenon that obscured it from view. These are speculative explanations, attempts to reconcile the myths with our scientific understanding. But they require assuming that the myths are garbled, confused, that they took one event and transformed it into another. They require us to trust our models of the past more than we trust the stories themselves. There is another interpretation, one that ventures further into uncertainty. A few researchers, operating at the margins of accepted science, have proposed that the moon might be younger than we think, that it might have arrived in Earth's orbit not billions of years ago but far more recently, within the time frame of human existence or near to it. This idea contradicts nearly everything we know about lunar geology, and the dating of moon rocks brought back by Apollo missions. It requires overturning fundamental aspects of our understanding. But it would explain the myths. It would explain why cultures across the world, separated by vast distances, all tell stories of a moonless sky. It would explain why these stories feel so specific, so insistent, so strangely persistent despite being scientifically impossible. Most scientists would say this explanation ventures too far, that it sacrifices too much established knowledge for the sake of accommodating ancient stories. And perhaps they are right. Perhaps the myths are simply myths, beautiful and poetic, but not literally true. Still, there is something haunting about these tales, something that lingers in the mind when you read them, when you imagine people looking up at a starry sky and remembering that it was once different. They speak with such certainty, these old voices. They do not sound confused or symbolic. They sound like people describing something they know, something their grandparents told them, something that was passed down as fact. The Proselynes claimed their ancestry reached back before the moon. The South American legend spoke of the moon's arrival as a specific event, a moment of transformation. The African stories described it being brought, placed, set into position. These are not vague creation myths. They are accounts of something happening, something changing. We may never know what truth, if any, lies buried in these ancient stories. We may never understand why so many cultures preserved such similar memories of a moonless world. But the stories remain, echoing across time, asking us to consider whether the moon's presence is as permanent and unchanging as we assume. They ask us to imagine a sky that once was different, a night that once held only stars, and they ask us to wonder what it might have meant when the moon first appeared, casting its silver light across a world that had never known such illumination before. Chapter 4. The Geometry of the Sky. There is a language older than words, a language written in angles and ratios, in distances and proportions. It is the language of geometry, the hidden mathematics that underlies the structure of reality. And when we look at the relationship between Earth, Moon, and Sun, we find this language speaking with unexpected eloquence, revealing patterns that seem almost too elegant to be accidental. The ancients understood that geometry was sacred, not sacred in a purely religious sense, but sacred because it revealed something fundamental about the way the cosmos was organized. They looked for these patterns everywhere, in the proportions of temples and pyramids, in the movements of planets, in the ratios that governed music and art. They believed that when you found geometry in nature, you were glimpsing the underlying order of creation itself. And in the moon, they found geometry of breathtaking precision. We have already spoken of the 400-to-1 ratio, the way the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, and 400 times closer to Earth. This is the relationship that creates perfect solar eclipses, the alignment that allows the moon to cover the sun so exactly that the solar corona becomes visible as a ring of fire around the lunar disk. But this is only the beginning of the geometric relationships that connect these three bodies. The diameter of the moon is 2,159 miles. The diameter of the sun is roughly 864,000 miles. If you divide the sun's diameter by the moon's diameter, you get very close to 400. Not exactly 400, but near enough that the coincidence holds its power. The distance from Earth to the moon averages about 238,000 miles. The distance from Earth to the sun averages about 93 million miles. Divide the sun's distance by the moon's distance, and again you arrive at a number very close to 400. These numbers echo each other, reinforcing the same ratio across different scales. It is as if the solar system were designed with this proportion in mind, as if 400 were a key signature woven into the fabric of our corner of space. There are other ratios hidden in the Earth-Moon relationship, patterns that emerge when you examine the numbers closely. The moon's orbit around Earth takes 27.3 days, what we call a sidereal month. The time from one new moon to the next, accounting for Earth's motion around the sun, is 29.5 days, a synodic month. These cycles, interwoven and overlapping, create the complex dance we observe in the lunar phases. Ancient astronomers mapped these cycles with remarkable accuracy. They knew that 19 solar years contained almost exactly 235 lunar months. This relationship, called the Metonic cycle, allowed them to predict eclipses and align their calendars with both the sun and moon. It was a gift of geometry, a pattern built into the heavens that could be decoded and used. The Babylonians knew it. The Greeks refined it. Cultures across the world discovered it independently, recognizing that the movements of the moon followed rules that could be understood, mathematics that could be trusted. But why should these cycles align so neatly? Why should 19 years and 235 months match up with such precision? In a random solar system, there is no reason to expect such elegant periodicities. Moons should orbit at whatever rate gravity dictates, creating cycles that are messy and irregular, difficult to predict. Yet our moon gives us patterns. It gives us cycles that fit together like pieces of a celestial puzzle. Some have noted that the moon's diameter, when measured in a specific way, appears to encode mathematical relationships that feel significant. If you measure the Earth's diameter at the equator and divide it by the moon's diameter, you get a number very close to 3.66. This number is approximately the square root of 13.4, and 13.4 is itself related to various geometric progressions that appear throughout nature. These are subtle relationships, the kind that require looking for them to notice. Skeptics would say this is numerology, finding patterns because we want to find them, selecting specific measurements and ratios that happen to yield interesting results, while ignoring the countless other ratios that don't. And perhaps there is truth in that skepticism. Perhaps we're simply seeing meaning where only randomness exists. But the patterns keep appearing. They cluster around the moon in ways that feel less like coincidence and more like design, even if we cannot say who or what might have done the designing. The moon's mass relative to Earth is also unusual. As we mentioned earlier, the moon is uncommonly large for a satellite, about 1/81st the mass of Earth. This ratio gives the moon enough gravitational influence to stabilize our planet's axial tilt, to create meaningful tides, to act as a true partner in the Earth-Moon system, rather than a mere orbiting rock. If the moon was smaller, even slightly, many of these effects would diminish. The tides would be weaker, reducing the mixing of nutrients in coastal waters that helped early life develop. The stabilization of Earth's tilt would be less effective, allowing for greater climate variation. The moon would be less present in human consciousness, a dimmer light in the sky, less capable of inspiring the wonder that has driven so much of our curiosity about the cosmos. But the moon is exactly large enough. Its mass is precisely calibrated to play the role it plays in Earth's story. There is a concept in sacred geometry known as squaring the circle, the ancient challenge of constructing a square with the same area as a given circle, using only compass and straight edge. It was proven mathematically impossible centuries ago, but the pursuit of it led to profound discoveries about the nature of pi and the relationship between curved and straight-line geometry. It represented something deeper than a geometric puzzle. It represented the attempt to find harmony between different kinds of perfection, circular and rectilinear, cosmic and earthly. Some researchers have pointed out that the Earth and Moon, when their dimensions are examined, demonstrate a kind of squaring of the circle. If you draw a circle with the diameter of the Moon and add it to a circle with the diameter of Earth, the resulting geometric relationship approximates the ratio between the circumference of a circle and the perimeter of a square. The numbers are not perfect, but they are close, closer than random chance might suggest. This relationship, if it is truly there and not merely an artifact of selective measurement, would mean that the Earth-Moon system encodes one of the most fundamental relationships in geometry. It would mean that ancient philosophers who saw divine proportion in the heavens were in some way correct. Of course, all of this must be approached with caution. Numbers can be made to say many things if you search long enough, if you try enough combinations and ratios. The human mind is extraordinarily good at finding patterns, even in random data. We see faces in clouds, hear messages in static, discover meaning in the arrangement of tea leaves. But there is a difference between seeing patterns everywhere and recognizing that some patterns are genuinely present. The question is not whether we can find mathematical relationships in the Earth-Moon system. The question is whether these relationships are meaningful, whether they tell us something true about the nature of our cosmic arrangement. The geometry is there, the ratios exist, the numbers align in ways that are, at minimum, surprising. Whether this geometry is the signature of chance or something else, something intentional, remains one of the quiet mysteries that the moon holds. A mystery written not in craters or Maria, not in rock or dust, but in the invisible architecture of space itself, in the angles and distances that govern our view of the sky, in the mathematical harmonies that ancient astronomers sensed but could not fully explain. The moon hangs there, precisely positioned, exactly the right size, tracing an orbit that gives us cycles we can predict and patterns we can trust. And beneath it all, written in the language of geometry, there may be a message we have not yet learned to read. Chapter 5. The Lunar Resonance and the Ringing Mystery. In the early hours of November 20th, 1969, the crew of Apollo 12 deliberately crashed the ascent stage of their lunar module into the moon's surface. It was not an accident, but an experiment. Seismometers had been placed on the lunar surface during the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 missions, sensitive instruments designed to listen to the moon's interior, to detect whatever movements or vibrations might occur within its ancient rock. The impact of the discarded module would provide a measurable shock, a way to probe the moon's structure through the echoes that travelled through its body. What happened next surprised everyone. The moon rang like a bell. For more than 3 hours, the seismometers recorded reverberations spreading through the lunar interior, waves of energy that should have dissipated quickly but instead continued, persistent and strange. The signal gradually diminished, but it took far longer to fade than anyone had predicted. It was as if the moon were not solid rock all the way through, but something else, something with spaces inside, something hollow. Scientists from NASA examined the data with puzzlement and interest. Dr. Maurice Ewing, a geophysicist working with the Apollo program, remarked that the moon was responding in a way that was completely unlike Earth. On our planet, seismic waves from earthquakes or explosions travel through the dense interior and dissipate relatively quickly, absorbed by the solid and liquid layers beneath the surface. But the moon seemed to lack this dampening effect. The vibrations travelled freely, bouncing and echoing as if moving through chambers or empty spaces. The experiment was repeated. During the Apollo 13 mission, which never landed due to the famous oxygen tank explosion, the Saturn 4B rocket stage was deliberately crashed into the moon. The impact was larger than the lunar module collision, carrying far more energy. The seismometers again recorded the result. Again, the moon rang. This time for more than 4 hours, the reverberations even stronger and more prolonged. With each subsequent Apollo mission, more impacts were studied. More data was gathered, and each time the moon responded in the same unexpected way, vibrating far longer than solid rock should allow. The phenomenon was not limited to artificial impacts. Natural moonquakes, small tremors occurring deep within the lunar interior, were also detected by the seismometers. These quakes were different from earthquakes. They lasted longer, their signals clearer and more sustained. Some continued for tens of minutes, the vibrations travelling through the moon with remarkably little attenuation. On Earth, seismic waves lose energy as they pass through different layers of rock, encountering boundaries and variations that scatter and absorb the vibrations. But the moon seemed to transmit seismic energy with unusual efficiency, as if its interior were more uniform than Earth's, or structured in a way that allowed vibrations to persist and travel. Scientists proposed explanations. Perhaps the moon's interior was extremely dry, lacking the water that helps dampen seismic waves on Earth. Perhaps the lunar rock was fractured and porous near the surface, creating a layer that amplified and prolonged vibrations. Perhaps the moon's crust was unusually rigid, allowing waves to reflect back and forth rather than dissipating into the depths. These theories helped. They provided mechanisms that could account for what was being observed, but they also revealed how different the moon was from what had been expected. Before the Apollo missions, many scientists assumed the moon would be similar to Earth in its internal structure, perhaps simpler, but fundamentally comparable. Instead, it turned out to be profoundly different, responding to impacts and tremors in ways that suggested an interior unlike anything we had directly studied before. The idea of a hollow moon, taken literally, is difficult to reconcile with what we know about gravity and planetary formation. A truly hollow sphere of the moon's size would collapse under its own gravity, unable to maintain structural integrity without something supporting it from within. The moon's mass and density have been measured, and while the density is lower than Earth's, it is consistent with a body made primarily of rock, not with a vast empty chamber lurking beneath the surface. But the seismic data remained strange. It suggested something about the moon's interior that did not fit neatly into conventional models. Whether that something was large voids or cavities, or simply an unusual arrangement of rock with different properties than we expected, the moon was clearly not behaving like a simple solid sphere. Some researchers began speaking of the moon as having a partially hollow interior, not a single vast cavity, but perhaps many smaller ones, distributed through the upper layers. This would explain the prolonged ringing without requiring the impossible physics of a completely hollow world. It would suggest that the moon's formation had left it with a unique internal structure, perhaps fractured by ancient impacts or shaped by volcanic processes that created chambers and voids now frozen in the lunar rock. There were other anomalies in the seismic data, details that deepen the mystery. The moonquakes detected by the seismometers tended to occur at specific depths, clustered around a layer about 800 to 1,000 kilometers below the surface. This depth marked a boundary of some kind, a transition in the moon's interior where conditions changed. Below this boundary, the moon appeared to absorb seismic energy more effectively, as if the deeper interior were different in composition or state. Some scientists suggested this boundary indicated a partially molten zone, a region where the moon's interior was still warm enough to flow, dampening vibrations through viscosity rather than rigidity. Others proposed that it marked the division between fractured outer layers and a more solid core. The data was not detailed enough to say for certain. The Apollo seismometers, remarkable as they were, could only provide limited information about the moon's deep structure. What was clear was that the moon had layers, complexity, an internal architecture that was not immediately obvious from the surface. The ringing moon became something of a sensation when the findings were first reported. It captured the public imagination in a way that more technical discoveries did not. The idea that the moon might be hollow, even partially, suggested something extraordinary, something that hinted at mysteries beyond conventional science. Some took it as evidence of artificial construction. The notion that the moon might not be a natural object at all, but something built, placed, designed. NASA scientists were careful to emphasize that the seismic data did not support such extreme interpretations. The moon's ringing could be explained through natural processes, unusual but not impossible. There was no need to invoke artificial construction or hidden chambers. The moon was simply different from Earth, structured in ways that reflected its unique history and formation. But the data had opened a door, allowing questions to be asked that had not been asked before. If the moon's interior was not what we expected, what else might we have misunderstood? If it could ring like a bell when struck, sustaining vibrations far longer than seemed reasonable, what other surprises might it hold? The seismometers left behind by the Apollo missions operated for several years before being shut down. They recorded thousands of moonquakes, hundreds of meteorite impacts, and the deliberate collisions of spacecraft components. Each event added to the data, filling in a picture of the moon's interior that was more complex and more mysterious than anyone had anticipated. And through it all, the moon continued to ring when struck, to reverberate with that peculiar sustained tone that had first surprised the scientists listening in November of 1969. It was a small thing, perhaps, in the grand scope of lunar science, a quirk of seismic propagation, an anomaly in wave attenuation. But it was also a reminder that the moon, for all our study and exploration, remained strange. That beneath its familiar face there was a structure we did not fully understand, a geometry of stone and void that did not match our expectations. The moon had secrets in its depths, written in the way vibrations travelled through its ancient body, and those secrets whispered of a world that was, in ways both subtle and profound, different from anything we had known before. Chapter 6. The Far Side and the Missing Pieces. For all of human history, until a single moment in January of 1959, no one had ever seen the far side of the moon. It was hidden from us, turned forever away by the moon's synchronous rotation, that elegant gravitational lock that keeps one hemisphere perpetually facing Earth. Philosophers and astronomers had wondered what lay on that unseen surface. Some imagined it would be identical to the near side, a mirror of the familiar Maria and Highlands we could observe through telescopes. Others suspected it might be different, that the division between near and far might mean something. They were right to suspect. When the Soviet spacecraft Lunar 3 swung around the moon and transmitted the first grainy photographs of the far side back to Earth, scientists saw immediately that something was wrong. Not wrong in the sense of damaged or broken, but wrong in the sense of unexpected, unexplained. The far side looked profoundly different from the near side. It was lighter in colour, heavily cratered, and almost entirely lacking the dark basaltic plains that dominate our view of the moon from Earth. The near side of the moon is marked by vast maria, the so-called seas that early astronomers mistook for bodies of water. These are actually ancient lava flows, basaltic rock that welled up from the moon's interior billions of years ago and flooded low-lying impact basins. They give the near side its familiar pattern, the face we see in the moon, the rabbit or the man or whatever shape different cultures have imagined in those dark patches. But on the far side, the maria are almost absent. There is one significant mare, called Mare Moscoviense, and a few smaller patches, but nothing comparable to the extensive volcanic plains of the near side. Instead, the far side is dominated by highlands, ancient cratered terrain that has remained largely unchanged for billions of years. This asymmetry is one of the moon's deepest puzzles. When the Apollo missions returned samples from the lunar surface and orbital mapping began in earnest, the differences between the two hemispheres became even more apparent. The far side crust is significantly thicker than the near side crust. Measurements indicated that the crust on the far side could be as much as 50 kilometers thick in places, while the near side crust averaged only 30 to 40 kilometers. This difference in thickness had profound implications for the moon's volcanic history. Lava can only reach the surface if it can break through the overlying rock. On the near side, with its thinner crust, molten rock from the lunar interior could more easily find its way upward, flooding impact basins and creating the maria we see. But on the far side, the thicker crust acted as a barrier, preventing most volcanic activity from reaching the surface. The lava that tried to rise simply cooled and solidified deep underground, never breaking through to create the dark plains that characterize the near side. But this explanation only raises another question. Why is the far side crust thicker? What process during the moon's formation created this asymmetry? Several theories have been proposed. One suggests that when the moon was still molten shortly after its formation, it was closer to Earth than it is now. Earth's strong gravitational field might have created tidal forces within the molten moon, concentrating heavier materials on one side while allowing lighter materials to accumulate on the other. Over time, as the moon cooled and solidified, this uneven distribution froze into place, creating the thicker far side crust. Another theory proposes that the asymmetry resulted from a second impact early in the moon's history. According to this idea, the moon was struck by a smaller body after its initial formation, and this collision excavated material from one hemisphere while depositing it on the other. The impact would have redistributed the moon's crust, thinning it on the near side and thickening it on the far side. A third possibility involves the way the moon cooled after formation. If the near side cooled more slowly than the far side, perhaps because it was receiving more heat from the still molten Earth, the crystallization process might have produced different crustal thicknesses. The details are complex, involving the behavior of magma and the formation of different mineral phases, but the result would be an asymmetric moon. All of these theories have merit. All of them can explain aspects of what we observe. But none of them has been definitively proven, and the question of why the two hemispheres are so different remains open. There is something almost deliberate about the way the moon presents itself to Earth. The near side, with its familiar patterns and dark maria, is the face we know, the surface we have watched throughout all of human history. It is varied and interesting, marked by features that inspire names and stories. The far side, hidden until the space age, is more uniform, more heavily cratered, less visually distinctive. It is as if the moon has two personalities, one turned toward us, engaging and familiar, the other turned away, remote and ancient, preserving a more pristine record of the solar system's violent early days. Some have noted that this division feels symbolic, the known and the unknown, the revealed and the concealed, the moon showing us one face while keeping another hidden, not through any intent of its own, but simply through the mechanics of tidal locking, the inevitable result of gravitational forces acting over billions of years. And yet the symbolism persists. The moon has a far side, a dark side in the sense of being unknown, though not actually darker in terms of sunlight. And for most of our existence, we could only imagine what might be there. The far side has fewer large impact basins than the near side. The South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the largest and oldest impact structures in the solar system, dominates the southern far side. It is a massive crater, more than 2,000 kilometers across and up to 8 kilometers deep, created by a colossal impact early in the moon's history. Yet even this enormous basin was not filled with lava the way near-side basins were. The far side crust was simply too thick to allow volcanic material to reach the surface in quantities sufficient to flood the basin. This absence of volcanic resurfacing means that the far side preserves a more ancient landscape. The craters there are older, overlapping and crowding each other in layers that record billions of years of impacts. It is a museum of the Moon's early history, a surface that has remained largely unchanged since the period of heavy bombardment that scarred all the inner planets. The near side, by contrast, has been partially renewed by volcanic activity. The Maria are relatively young by lunar standards, only 3 to 4 billion years old, compared to the ancient highlands that date back 4.5 billion years. This makes the near side a palimpsest, a surface written and rewritten, with newer features overlaying older ones. When humans finally walked on the Moon, they walked only on the near side. All 6 Apollo landings took place on the hemisphere facing Earth, within sight of home. The far side remained accessible only through orbital observations and remote sensing. It was not until 2019 that any craft landed on the far side, when the Chinese Chang'e 4 mission touched down in the von Karman crater. That landing revealed the far side to be much as the orbital observations had suggested. Ancient, heavily cratered, geologically quiet. The rocks there told stories of the Moon's earliest days, of the bombardment that shaped its surface, of the processes that had operated before volcanic activity ceased, and the Moon became the cold, inactive world we know today. But the asymmetry between near and far remains unexplained in a deep sense. We can describe it, measure it, propose mechanisms that might have caused it. But we do not fully understand why the Moon developed this way, why tidal locking should be accompanied by such a profound difference in geology. There is a feeling when you look at maps of the Moon's 2 hemispheres side by side, of looking at 2 different worlds, the near side inviting and patterned, the far side remote and scarred. One hemisphere shaped by internal forces that brought dark rock to the surface, the other shaped only by external forces, by the rain of asteroids and comets that has gradually worn it down over the eons. The Moon, it seems, is divided, not just in the simple sense of having 2 sides, but divided in its very nature, as if it were composed of 2 distinct halves that were joined together but never quite became one. And we, on Earth, see only one of those halves. The Moon's tidal locking ensures that the far side remains perpetually turned away, forever beyond our direct sight, knowable only through the indirect methods of spacecraft and remote observation. It is a reminder that even the most familiar objects can hold hidden depths, that the Moon we think we know is only half the story, and the other half is written in ancient stone on a surface we have barely begun to explore. Chapter 7. The Moon's Influence on Life and Consciousness. Long before humans understood gravity or orbital mechanics, they knew the Moon had power over the world. They watched the tides rise and fall with the Moon's passage across the sky. They noticed that certain creatures emerged to feed or mate when the Moon was full, while others preferred the darkness of the new Moon. They felt something shift within themselves on moonlit nights, a restlessness or clarity that seemed to come from the silver light itself. These observations were not superstition, though they were often wrapped in the language of magic and myth. They were recognitions of a real relationship, a tangible connection between the Moon and the living world below. Modern science has confirmed what ancient peoples knew intuitively. The Moon shapes life on Earth in ways both obvious and subtle, from the movement of oceans to the rhythms encoded in our very cells. The tides are the Moon's most visible gift to Earth. Twice each day the oceans rise and fall, pulled by the Moon's gravity as it passes overhead. The Sun contributes to this effect as well, but the Moon, being so much closer, is the dominant force. When the Moon is full or new, when it aligns with the Sun, the tides are strongest, what we call spring tides. When the Moon is at quarter phase, its pull works at an angle to the Sun's, and the tides are gentler, what we call neap tides. This endless cycle of rising and falling water has profound effects on coastal ecosystems. Tidal zones are among the most productive environments on Earth, rich with life that has adapted to the rhythm of inundation and exposure. Creatures have evolved to time their activities to the tides, emerging to feed when the water retreats, burrowing deep when it returns. The mixing of nutrients, the oxygenation of water, the constant churning of sediment, all of these processes depend on tidal flow. Some scientists have suggested that tides may have played a crucial role in the origin of life itself. The tidal pools at the ocean's edge, alternately flooded and exposed, would have created unique chemical environments. Organic molecules could have concentrated in these pools as water evaporated, increasing the likelihood of reactions that might lead to more complex structures. The cycle of wet and dry, of mixing and separation, could have provided the conditions needed for the first self-replicating molecules to emerge. If this is true, then life on Earth owes its existence not just to the chemistry of our planet, but to the gravitational influence of the Moon. We are, in a very real sense, children of the tides. Beyond the tides, the Moon influences biological rhythms in ways that are still being discovered. Many organisms have internal clocks synchronized to the lunar cycle. Certain species of coral spawn only during specific lunar phases, releasing their eggs and sperm into the water in massive synchronized events that occur once a month or once a year, always timed to the Moon. Horseshoe crabs emerge onto beaches to lay eggs during spring tides, when the Moon is full or new. Some species of moths and other nocturnal insects adjust their behavior based on the Moon's brightness, becoming more or less active as the lunar phases change. These lunar rhythms are not learned behaviors. They are encoded genetically, passed down through countless generations. Even organisms raised in laboratories with no exposure to the Moon still exhibit lunar periodicity, their internal clocks ticking away to a 29.5-day cycle that matches the Moon's phases. Something in their biology has been tuned to the Moon, calibrated to its presence. Humans are not exempt from these influences. Studies have found subtle correlations between the lunar cycle and various physiological processes. Sleep patterns sometimes shift slightly during full moons, with some people experiencing shorter or more fragmented sleep. Whether this is due to the Moon's light, to some gravitational effect, or to psychological associations with the full moon remains unclear. The effects are small, easily obscured by other factors, but they appear to be real. The Moon's stabilizing effect on Earth's axial tilt may be its most important contribution to the development of complex life. Earth's axis is tilted at approximately 23.5 degrees relative to its orbital plane. This tilt gives us our seasons, the regular cycle of summer and winter that creates diverse climate zones and drives weather patterns. Without the Moon's gravitational presence, this tilt would not remain stable. Computer simulations of an Earth without the Moon show a planet whose axial tilt varies wildly over time. In some scenarios, the tilt could swing from nearly 0 degrees to more than 80 degrees, and back again over periods of millions of years. Such extreme variations would create climatic chaos. During periods of low tilt, there would be almost no seasons, with the equator receiving constant sun and the poles in perpetual twilight. During periods of high tilt, the poles would experience months of direct sunlight followed by months of darkness, while the equator would see the sun passing nearly overhead only briefly each year. Life could potentially adapt to such conditions, but it would be far more difficult. The rapid climate swings on geological timescales would stress ecosystems, making long-term evolutionary developments less likely. The stable climate we have enjoyed, stable enough for forests to develop, and ice ages to come and go in predictable patterns, depends on the Moon keeping our planet's tilt steady. The Moon is a guardian in this sense, a stabilizing presence that has allowed Earth to maintain the environmental consistency needed for life to become complex and eventually conscious. There is another effect, more speculative but worth considering. Some researchers have wondered whether the Moon might influence human consciousness in ways we do not fully understand. Not through mystical means, but through subtle biological mechanisms that we have not yet identified. The Moon's light is different from the Sun's. It is reflected sunlight, polarized and shifted in spectrum as it bounces off the lunar surface. For millions of years before artificial lighting, this was the only light that illuminated the night. Our ancestors navigated by moonlight, hunted by moonlight, gathered by moonlight. Their nervous systems were shaped by the presence of this changing illumination, by the cycle from darkness to silver brightness and back again. It has been said that the full moon affects human behavior, that hospitals and police stations see more activity during full lunar phases. These claims have been investigated repeatedly, and the results are mixed. Most large-scale studies find no significant correlation between the lunar cycle and human behavior. But the belief persists, carried through folklore and personal experience, the sense that something shifts when the moon is full. Perhaps what we are sensing is not a direct effect, but an echo of our evolutionary past. A time when moonlight meant something different, when it was the difference between being able to see predators and being vulnerable in darkness. When it was a signal for certain activities, certain risks, certain opportunities that no longer exist in our artificially lit world. The moon has also shaped human culture and consciousness in more obvious ways. It gave us our first calendar, the most natural way to measure time beyond the daily cycle of sunrise and sunset. Lunar months are visible and countable, marked by the changing shape of the moon in the sky. Nearly every early culture developed lunar calendars, tracking the moon's phases to organize agricultural activities, religious observances, and social gatherings. The words we use for timekeeping reflect this lunar origin. The word month comes from moon. Many languages have similar connections. They're words for measuring time rooted in observations of the moon. The moon gave us a way to think about cyclical time, about the returning of familiar patterns. Unlike the sun's annual cycle, which is long and difficult to track, precisely without careful observation, the moon's cycle is immediate and obvious. You can watch it change from night to night, see it wax and wane and return to its starting point. This taught us something fundamental about the nature of time itself, that it could repeat, that patterns could return. There is a poetic symmetry to the moon's relationship with life on Earth. It pulls at our oceans, perhaps helping to spark the first living cells. It stabilizes our climate, allowing those cells to evolve into complex organisms over billions of years. It gives rhythm to the natural world, encoding lunar cycles into the biology of countless species. And it gives rhythm to human culture, providing the first clock beyond the day, the first way to organize time into units that could be named and remembered. The moon is woven into the fabric of life on Earth in ways both tangible and mysterious. We exist in a world shaped by its presence, influenced by its gravity, illuminated by its reflected light. Whether we are aware of it or not, whether we look up and notice it or not, the moon is there, playing its silent role in the great unfolding of life on this planet. And perhaps, in ways we have not yet discovered, it plays a role in consciousness itself, in the very fact that we can look up and wonder about it, ask questions about its nature, feel moved by its beauty. Perhaps the moon, in stabilizing Earth and making complex life possible, has also made it possible for the universe to become aware of itself through us. Made it possible for consciousness to arise and turn its gaze upward, contemplating the celestial companion that helped make that consciousness possible. Chapter 8. The question of placement and purpose. There are two ways to look at the moon's remarkable characteristics. The first is to see them as coincidences, extraordinary but ultimately explainable through the laws of physics and the randomness of cosmic history. The second is to see them as evidence of something else, something that transcends accident and enters the territory of purpose, design, intention. Neither perspective can be proven absolutely. Both require a kind of faith, a commitment to a particular way of understanding reality. And between these two positions lies a vast landscape of uncertainty, a space where questions multiply faster than answers. Consider what we know. The moon is exactly the right size and distance to create perfect solar eclipses. It stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, making complex life possible. It creates tides that may have been essential for the origin of life. It rings when struck, suggesting an interior structure unlike anything we initially expected. It shows only one face to Earth, keeping its far side hidden for all of human history. Ancient stories from cultures around the world describe a time before the moon existed. Any one of these facts, taken alone, can be explained. But taken together, they create a pattern that feels almost deliberate, as if the moon were not simply placed in orbit around Earth, but positioned with care, calibrated to play specific roles in Earth's story. This raises an uncomfortable question. If the moon's placement does suggest purpose, whose purpose? What intelligence or force could have arranged the cosmos with such precision? Science tends to resist questions of purpose. It focuses on mechanism and process, on how things happen rather than why they happen. When we ask why the moon is positioned as it is, science answers with the giant impact hypothesis, the theory that a Mars-sized body collided with the early Earth, and the debris coalesced into the moon. This is a good answer. It explains many aspects of the moon's composition and orbit. It fits within our understanding of planetary formation, but it does not fully explain the coincidences. It does not explain why the impact happened to create a moon of exactly the right size at exactly the right distance. It does not explain why this moon, among all the moons in the solar system, should be so uniquely suited to supporting the development of life on its planet. The giant impact hypothesis tells us that the moon is a product of violence and chaos. But the result of that chaos is order, precision, a relationship between Earth and Moon that functions almost like a machine designed for a purpose. Some have wondered if there might be a kind of fine-tuning at work in the universe. Not the fine-tuning of a watchmaker deity who sets everything in motion, but something subtler. Perhaps the laws of physics themselves select for configurations that lead to complexity and life. Perhaps universes or solar systems that randomly achieve stable, life-supporting arrangements are the ones that persist long enough for beings to evolve who can wonder about these questions. This idea, sometimes called the anthropic principle, suggests that we should not be surprised to find ourselves in a universe that seems remarkably well suited to our existence. We could only exist in such a universe, so of course we find the conditions that made us possible. The moon's characteristics, in this view, are not evidence of design but simply the preconditions for our being here to observe them. It is a persuasive argument, but it does not quite dispel the sense of wonder that arises when we examine the moon's properties. Even if we accept that we could only exist in a universe with these characteristics, the fact that such a universe exists at all feels remarkable. There is another possibility, one that ventures even further into speculation. What if the moon is not entirely natural? What if it was, in some sense, constructed or modified or placed? This idea exists at the far edges of scientific respectability. It has been proposed by various researchers over the years, most famously by Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Shcherbakov in a 1970 article that suggested the moon might be a hollow artificial satellite. Their hypothesis was based on many of the anomalies we have discussed: the seismic ringing, the low density, the peculiar orbit. Mainstream science has not embraced this idea. The evidence for the moon's natural formation is substantial. The rocks brought back by Apollo missions are consistent with a body that formed from the same primordial material as Earth. The craters and geological features match what we would expect from billions of years of natural processes. There are no visible signs of artificial construction, no structures or mechanisms that would indicate the moon is anything other than a natural satellite. But the idea persists, not because of strong evidence, but because of the persistent strangeness of the moon itself. Because the coincidences keep accumulating. Because there is something about the moon that does not quite feel accidental. Perhaps the question of natural versus artificial is the wrong framework. Perhaps there are middle grounds, possibilities that lie between pure chance and deliberate construction. The universe is full of self-organizing systems, structures that emerge naturally, but exhibit properties that seem designed. Crystals form in precise geometric patterns. Galaxies spiral in elegant shapes. Living organisms develop staggering complexity through the simple mechanism of evolution. Maybe the Earth-Moon system is another example of this kind of emergent order. Maybe the laws of physics, when given the initial conditions of the early solar system, naturally produce stable planet-moon pairs with the characteristics we observe. Maybe what looks like design is simply what inevitably emerges when gravity and matter interact over billions of years. This would mean that the moon's placement is neither accident nor intention, but something in between. Not random, but not chosen. A natural outcome that nevertheless exhibits purpose-like qualities because the universe itself is structured in ways that favour certain configurations over others. Ancient philosophers spoke of the celestial spheres, the nested crystal shells that they believed carried the sun, moon, planets and stars around the Earth. This model was wrong in its specifics, but it captured something important: the sense that the heavens were ordered, that the movements of celestial bodies followed patterns that could be understood and predicted, the sense that there was meaning in the sky, that the positions and relationships of astronomical objects mattered. Modern astronomy replaced the crystal spheres with gravity and inertia, with forces and trajectories that need no divine guidance to function. But the patterns remain. The order is still there, written in the orbits and alignments that we can calculate with precision. The moon moves in its circle around Earth, always the same distance on average, always showing the same face. The sun and moon play their dance across the sky, creating eclipses with mathematical regularity. Earth spins steadily on its tilted axis, held stable by the moon's gravitational embrace. These patterns are beautiful. They are also functional. serving roles in the development and maintenance of life on Earth. Whether that functionality is the result of chance, necessity, or something we have not yet named remains one of the deepest questions we can ask about our place in the cosmos. There is a phrase sometimes used in discussions of cosmic fine-tuning, the Goldilocks principle. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. The Moon embodies this principle perfectly. Not too large, not too small, not too close, not too far, not too dense, not too diffuse. It is exactly what it needs to be to fulfill the role it plays. Whether this is because it was made that way, or because only such a moon could have led to beings capable of noticing it, or because we are simply lucky beyond measure, we cannot say with certainty. All we can do is observe, measure, wonder, and acknowledge that the moon is, in the end, extraordinary. Sometimes, when we look up at the moon hanging in the evening sky, it is possible to feel the weight of these questions, to sense that we are looking at something that is both utterly familiar and deeply mysterious. To wonder if its placement is a gift, an accident, or something else entirely that we do not yet have the wisdom to name. The moon does not answer. It simply continues its eternal circuit, silent and luminous, exactly where it has always been, watching over a world that it may have helped to create, in ways both obvious and hidden, through forces we understand and forces we have only begun to glimpse. Chapter 9. The Moon in Modern Science. On July 20th, 1969, two human beings stood on the surface of another world for the first time in our species' history. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin descended from the lunar module Eagle onto the grey dust of the Sea of Tranquility, and in that moment the moon transformed from an object of distant wonder into a place that could be touched, walked upon, studied directly. It became, in some sense, less mysterious. And yet in other ways the mysteries only deepened. The Apollo missions brought back 842 pounds of lunar rock and soil. These samples have been studied intensively for more than 50 years, analysed with every technique modern science can bring to bear. They have told us the moon's age, its composition, the history written in its stones, but they have also revealed how strange the moon truly is, how different from what we expected, even as we walked upon its surface. The rocks confirmed that the moon is ancient, roughly 4.5 billion years old, formed in the earliest era of the solar system. They showed that the moon was once molten, covered by an ocean of magma that slowly cooled and crystallized. Lighter minerals floated to the surface, forming the bright highlands we see today. Heavier minerals sank, creating a differentiated interior with distinct layers. This much matched expectations, but the details revealed puzzles. The moon's rocks are depleted in volatile elements, the lighter substances that would have evaporated if the moon formed in extreme heat. This supports the giant impact hypothesis, the idea that the moon formed from debris ejected when a massive body collided with Earth. The heat from such an impact would have boiled away volatile compounds, leaving behind only the more stable, heavier elements, but the isotopic signatures in lunar rocks are surprisingly similar to Earth rocks. Isotopes are variants of elements with different numbers of neutrons, and their ratios are typically unique to different bodies in the solar system. Each planet, each asteroid has its own isotopic fingerprint based on where and how it formed. The Moon and Earth share isotopic ratios that are nearly identical, far more similar than they should be if the Moon formed partially from a separate impacting body. Scientists have proposed refinements to the giant impact theory to account for this. Perhaps the collision was so energetic that Earth and the impactor were completely vaporized and mixed before the Moon coalesced. Perhaps there were multiple impacts rather than one. Perhaps the impactor happened to have already formed from material very similar to Earth's. The explanations work after a fashion, but they require fine-tuning the scenario, adjusting parameters to match the observations. The Moon's formation remains understood in broad strokes but mysterious in its specifics. Modern missions continue to probe the Moon's secrets. Orbiters have mapped its surface in exquisite detail, measuring gravitational variations that reveal dense concentrations of mass beneath certain impact basins. These mascons, as they are called, are thought to be the remnants of dense mantle material brought up by massive impacts. They create gravitational anomalies strong enough to affect spacecraft orbits, requiring careful planning for any mission that flies close to the lunar surface. The presence of water on the Moon was one of the most surprising discoveries of recent decades. For years, the Moon was thought to be bone dry, completely devoid of water due to the lack of atmosphere and the history of intense heating. But observations from orbiting spacecraft detected hydrogen signatures near the lunar poles in permanently shadowed craters where the temperature never rises above a few dozen degrees above absolute zero. Impacts from spacecraft deliberately crashed into these regions confirmed the presence of water ice. Not vast reservoirs, but significant deposits mixed with the regolith, the dusty soil that covers the moon's surface. This water likely came from comets and asteroids that struck the moon over billions of years, their icy cores fragmenting and settling into the coldest, most protected areas. The discovery of lunar water changes how we think about future exploration. Water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, providing both breathable air and rocket fuel. A permanently shadowed crater at the moon's pole could become a resource depot, a place where future missions could refuel and resupply. The moon, once seen as a barren destination interesting only for science, has become a potential stepping stone for deeper space exploration. Other missions have studied the moon's magnetic properties, another source of puzzlement. The moon has no global magnetic field today, no equivalent to Earth's protective magnetosphere. But some lunar rocks are magnetized, suggesting that the moon once had a strong magnetic field billions of years ago. On Earth, the magnetic field is generated by the motion of molten iron in the planet's outer core. This requires a liquid iron core of sufficient size and heat, along with convection currents driven by the cooling of the planet's interior. For the moon to have once had a magnetic field, it too must have had a liquid core, at least partially. But the moon is small, and small bodies cool faster. How the moon maintained a magnetic field for long enough to magnetize surface rocks remains unclear. Some researchers have proposed that the moon's magnetic field was amplified by the way it interacted with Earth's field when the moon was closer. Others suggest that large impacts could have temporarily generated powerful magnetic fields as vaporized rock expanded and cooled. The question is still debated, another example of the moon refusing to fit neatly into our models. Modern science has also revealed the moon's surface to be more dynamic than we once thought. The moon has no atmosphere, no weather, no water to erode its surface. It should be geologically dead, changing only when struck by meteorites. And yet, observations have detected transient lunar phenomena, brief flashes of light, glowing patches that appear and disappear, changes in brightness in certain regions. These phenomena have been reported for centuries by Earth-based observers, often dismissed as atmospheric effects or observational errors. But modern monitoring has confirmed that something is happening on the moon's surface. The events are rare and localized, but they occur. Some may be caused by impacts from small meteoroids. Others might be outgassing, the release of trapped gases from the lunar interior. A few might even be lunar quakes causing rock slides that reflect sunlight differently. The moon, even now, is not completely static. It retains a faint activity, echoes of processes that were once far more vigorous. Perhaps the most profound contribution of modern lunar science is not any single discovery, but the shift in perspective it has provided. Before the space age, the moon was an object in the sky, beautiful and distant. We projected our myths and dreams onto it, made it a symbol of romance and mystery. The Apollo missions were supposed to strip away that mystery, to reduce the moon to just another rock floating in space. But that is not what happened. The moon became real in a new way, a world with its own geography and history. The astronauts who walked there described the profound strangeness of standing on another celestial body, of looking up and seeing Earth hanging in the black sky. They spoke of the silence, the absolute absence of sound in the airless environment. They described the lunar dust, fine as talc, clinging to everything, smelling bizarrely like spent gunpowder. These details did not diminish the moon's mystery. They transformed it, made it specific and textured, a place that could be known but never fully tamed. Modern science has given us tools to study the moon with unprecedented precision. We can measure its gravitational field to detect variations in density beneath the surface. We can analyze the composition of its soil from orbit using spectrometers that detect the wavelengths of reflected sunlight. We can bounce laser beams off reflectors left by Apollo astronauts to measure the moon's distance to within millimeters, tracking its gradual recession from Earth. All of this knowledge is remarkable. It represents decades of effort, billions of dollars invested, the combined wisdom of thousands of scientists and engineers working to understand our nearest neighbor. And yet the fundamental questions remain. How exactly did the moon form? Why is its far side so different from its near side? What accounts for the perfect alignments and proportions that make it so uniquely suited to Earth's needs? Is there any meaning to be found in these coincidences, or are we simply reading patterns into randomness? Science excels at answering how but struggles with why. It can tell us the mechanisms by which the moon stabilizes Earth's tilt, but not why the universe is structured such that this stabilization is necessary for complex life. It can describe the physics of tidal locking, but not why the moon achieved this state so completely that one face remains forever hidden from Earth. These why questions may be meaningless. They may be artifacts of human psychology, our tendency to seek purpose and intention in natural phenomena, or they may be pointing towards something deeper, some organizing principle that science has not yet learned to see. The moon sits at the boundary between what we know and what we wonder. Modern science has illuminated it with extraordinary clarity, mapped its every crater, analyzed its every rock. But the more we learn, the more we realize how much remains unknown, how much the moon continues to surprise us with its strangeness, its refusal to be fully explained. There will be more missions to the moon in the coming years, robotic landers from multiple nations, perhaps human bases established at the poles where water ice waits in perpetual darkness. Each mission will answer questions and raise new ones. Each will add detail to our picture of the moon, while preserving the deeper mystery of what it means and why it is there. Science will continue its patient work, accumulating data, refining theories, building ever more sophisticated models of the moon's origin and evolution. And perhaps one day, we will understand it completely. Perhaps all the coincidences will be explained, all the anomalies resolved, all the questions answered. Or perhaps the moon will always retain some essential mystery, some quality that eludes complete understanding. Perhaps it is meant to remain just slightly beyond our grasp, a reminder that the universe holds wonders we can approach, but never fully possess. Chapter 10. The Moon in Spiritual Imagination. There is another way to know the moon, one that does not rely on telescopes or spacecraft, on measurements or mathematical models. It is the way of contemplation, of symbol and metaphor, of seeing the moon not as an object to be analysed, but as a presence to be experienced. This way of knowing is older than science, woven through every spiritual tradition that has emerged under the night sky. And while it speaks in the language of poetry rather than precision, it touches on truths that numbers alone cannot capture. The moon has been a spiritual symbol for as long as humans have had symbols. It appears in the sacred texts and practices of traditions from every corner of the world, representing transformation, reflection, the eternal cycle of death and renewal. To understand what the moon has meant to the human soul, we must step away from the question of what it is and ask instead what it reveals. In many traditions, the moon is understood as a mirror. Unlike the sun, which generates its own light, the moon reflects the sun's radiance. It receives light and returns it, transformed by the journey. This quality of reflection has made the moon a symbol for consciousness itself, for the human capacity to receive divine light, truth or wisdom, and reflect it back into the world. The medieval alchemists worked with this symbolism extensively. They associated the sun with gold, with pure spirit, with the active masculine principle. The moon they associated with silver, with the soul, with the receptive feminine principle. The great work of alchemy was to unite these two principles, to marry sun and moon, creating something that transcended both. In their intricate drawings and obscure texts, the moon appears again and again, paired with the sun, representing the balance between doing and being, between will and acceptance. This pairing was not meant to be taken literally. The alchemists were not really trying to transmute lead into gold, or at least not only that. They were describing an inner transformation, a process of refining consciousness until it achieved a kind of perfection. The moon in their work represented the soul's journey through darkness and light, through phases of emptiness and fullness, always cycling, always changing, always returning. The moon's phases have been mirrors for the cycles of human life and spiritual development. The new moon, dark and invisible, has represented beginnings, potential, the void from which all things emerge. It is the moment of intention, of planting seeds that will grow in the light to come. The waxing moon, growing brighter each night, has symbolized growth and accumulation. It is the time of building, of gathering energy, of allowing what has been planted to develop and strengthen. Many spiritual traditions have taught that this is the time for outward action, for manifesting intentions in the world. The full moon, luminous and complete, has represented fulfillment, illumination, the peak of a cycle. It is the moment when what was hidden becomes visible, when consciousness reaches its fullest expression. But it is also a turning point, the moment before the light begins to fade. The waning moon, diminishing night by night, has symbolized release, letting go, the necessary dissolution that precedes renewal. It is the time for clearing away what no longer serves, for making space for the next cycle to begin. These phases repeat endlessly, each complete cycle taking approximately 29.5 days. Generation after generation has watched this cycle and recognized in it the pattern of their own lives, their own growth and decline, the rhythm of creation and destruction that governs all things. Buddhist meditation practices have used the moon as an object of contemplation. In some traditions, practitioners visualize the moon's disk as perfectly white and luminous, using this image as a focus for developing concentration and inner clarity. The moon represents the pure nature of mind, undisturbed and radiant, reflecting reality without distortion. There are stories in Buddhist literature of students achieving sudden enlightenment upon seeing the full moon. The sight triggers something, a recognition that the moon's clear light is like the clarity of awakened consciousness. Both shine without effort, without preference, illuminating whatever is present without judgment. In Zen, there is a famous saying, "The moon's reflection on still water is not the moon, yet it is not other than the moon." This points to the relationship between reality and our perception of it, the way consciousness reflects the world without being separate from it. The moon becomes a teaching tool, a way of understanding something subtle about the nature of experience itself. In Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, the moon appears in poetry as the beloved's face, distant and beautiful, drawing the seeker's heart upward. Rumi wrote of the moon's light as the presence of God made visible, a reminder that the divine is always there even when hidden by clouds or circumstance. The moon in Sufi poetry is not just a symbol, but a living presence, something that calls to the soul and invites it to transcend the ordinary world. Other Sufi poets spoke of the moon's journey across the sky as an image of the soul's journey toward God. The moon rises in darkness, crosses the heavens and sets again, just as the soul emerges from unknowing, travels through the world of experience and returns to its source transformed. The cycle is eternal, and each completion is also a beginning. Indigenous traditions around the world have developed their own relationships with the moon, understanding it not as a symbol, but as a being, a presence with agency and power. Many Native American tribes have names for each full moon of the year, names that reflect the natural rhythms of their lands. The snow moon, the harvest moon, the hunter's moon, each marking a time when certain activities are appropriate, when the world is in a particular state. These names are not arbitrary. They represent generations of observation, a deep knowing of how the moon's cycle interweaves with the cycles of plants and animals, weather and season. The moon in these traditions is part of the web of relationships that constitutes reality. It is family, elder, teacher, guide. Some traditions speak of the moon as grandmother, the wise feminine presence who watches over the world with patience and compassion. Others see the moon as a trickster, playful and unpredictable, reminding humans not to take themselves too seriously. Still others view the moon as a keeper of women's mysteries, connected to the cycles of fertility and life. In Hindu and yogic traditions, the moon is associated with the mind and emotions. The Sanskrit word for moon is Chandra, and the subtle energy channels in the body are said to include the Chandra Nadi, the lunar channel that cools and calms. Practices that work with this lunar energy are meant to balance the solar energy, the heat and intensity that drives action and transformation. The full moon is considered particularly auspicious in many Hindu traditions. It is a time for meditation, for ritual, for connecting with the divine. The moon's light is said to carry spiritual blessings, and exposure to it is thought to nourish not just the body, but the subtle energies that sustain consciousness. There are practices of moonbathing, sitting in meditation under the full moon's light, allowing its radiance to wash over the body and mind. This is not superstition, but experiential practice, based on the felt sense that moonlight affects consciousness differently than sunlight, that it soothes and clarifies in ways that are subtle but real. Western magical traditions have worked extensively with lunar symbolism and timing. The phases of the moon are used to determine when certain kinds of work should be undertaken. Spells for increase and growth are cast during the waxing moon. Work involving banishing or releasing is done during the waning moon. The full moon is a time of power, when intentions manifest most strongly. The new moon is a time of rest and planning, gathering energy for the cycle to come. Whether these practices have objective efficacy is less important than what they reveal about human psychology. We are creatures who respond to rhythm and cycle. The moon's phases provide a natural framework for organizing intention and action, for moving through stages of development in alignment with something larger than ourselves. By working with the moon's cycle, practitioners develop a relationship with time that is not linear but circular, not progressive but recursive. Each return to the new moon is not a return to the same place, but to the same phase in a spiral that moves both forward and inward. This way of experiencing time is deeply healing for people who live in cultures that emphasize constant progress and growth. The moon reminds us that rest and release are as important as action and accumulation. There is something profound in humanity's collective decision to see the moon as spiritually significant. We could have ignored it, treated it as merely another feature of the night sky. But instead, culture after culture has turned to the moon as a source of meaning, a teacher of wisdom, a companion in the night. Perhaps this is because the moon embodies qualities that speak to something deep in the human psyche. It changes yet remains the same. It is present yet distant. It illuminates darkness without dispelling it entirely, allowing us to see just enough to find our way without overwhelming the mystery of night. The moon teaches us about impermanence, showing us that all things wax and wane, that fullness inevitably gives way to emptiness, and emptiness to fullness again. This is a hard teaching for minds that cling to permanence, that want things to stay as they are. But it is also a liberating teaching, a reminder that no state lasts forever, that change is not failure, but the nature of reality itself. In the end, the spiritual significance of the moon may not be something that can be proven or disproven. It exists in the realm of meaning rather than mechanism, in the space between what we can measure and what we can feel. The moon affects us because we allow it to, because we open ourselves to its presence and invite it to participate in our inner lives. This is not weakness or delusion. It is an acknowledgement that we are beings who live by meaning as much as by matter, who need symbol and story to make sense of existence. The moon offers itself as such a symbol, constant yet changing, familiar yet mysterious, near enough to see clearly and far enough to remain forever other, and so we continue to look up at it, not just with the eyes of science, but with the eyes of soul, seeing in its phases the pattern of our lives, in its light the possibility of illumination, in its cycles the promise that what has ended will begin again. Chapter 11. What we still do not know. For all the missions we have sent, for all the rocks we have studied, for all the measurements we have made, the moon remains in many ways unknown to us. Not unknown in the sense that we have no information, but unknown in the deeper sense that information does not always lead to understanding. We have gathered facts about the moon, compiled vast databases of lunar knowledge, and yet the essential nature of our relationship with it continues to elude complete explanation. There are specific questions, technical mysteries that science has not yet solved. But there are also broader uncertainties, questions about meaning and purpose that may not have scientific answers at all. Both kinds of unknowing are important. Both remind us that the moon is not yet finished teaching us what it has to teach. We do not know with absolute certainty how the moon formed. The giant impact hypothesis is our best current theory, supported by computer simulations and consistent with much of what we observe. But the details remain elusive. What was the exact nature of the impacting body? How did the collision unfold? Why are the isotopic signatures of Earth and Moon so similar when they should show evidence of two distinct parent bodies? These are not small questions. They go to the heart of the moon's origin, to the moment when it came into being. We can describe plausible scenarios, but we cannot point to a single definitive account and say with confidence, this is how it happened. Other formation theories exist at the margins of scientific discussion. Perhaps the Moon formed separately and was captured by Earth's gravity, though the orbital mechanics make this extremely unlikely. Perhaps it condensed from the same cloud of material that formed Earth, though this would not explain the differences in composition and density. Perhaps something else occurred, some process we have not yet imagined. The formation of the Moon is a historical event, something that happened once, 4.5 billion years ago. We cannot replay it, cannot observe it directly. We can only work backward from the evidence that remains, trying to infer the past from the present. This is always uncertain work, always provisional. We do not fully understand the Moon's interior structure. The seismic data from Apollo missions revealed a Moon that rings when struck, that transmits vibrations far longer than expected. But the seismometers were few and operated for only a limited time. The picture they provided is incomplete, like trying to understand the structure of a house by listening to echoes in just 1 or 2 rooms. Does the Moon have a solid iron core like Earth? Probably, but we are not certain of its size or state. Some models suggest a small core, perhaps only a few hundred kilometers in radius. Others allow for a partially molten outer core surrounding a solid inner core. The gravitational measurements from orbiting spacecraft constrain the possibilities, but do not provide definitive answers. The question of whether the Moon ever had a global magnetic field and how long it persisted remains unresolved. The magnetized rocks returned by Apollo missions prove that strong magnetic fields existed at least locally, at least temporarily. But whether these fields were generated internally by a lunar dynamo or created by impacts or some other mechanism is still debated. And the unusual seismic properties, the prolonged ringing, the way vibrations travel through the lunar body, all of this points to an internal structure that is somehow different from what we expected. Whether that difference is voids and cavities, or simply rock with unusual mechanical properties, or some combination, we cannot say with certainty based on the limited data we have. We do not know why the near and far sides of the Moon are so different. We can describe the differences in detail. The thicker crust on the far side, the concentration of Maria on the near side, the asymmetry in composition and geology. We have theories about how this asymmetry might have developed, but we do not have a definitive explanation that accounts for all the observations without requiring multiple assumptions and fine-tuned conditions. The Moon is a small body, only about 1/4 of the diameter of Earth. Small bodies generally cool quickly and uniformly, developing relatively symmetric structures. The Moon's pronounced asymmetry suggests that something unusual happened during or shortly after its formation, something that created lasting differences between the 2 hemispheres. Was it the influence of Earth's gravity on the still molten Moon? Was it a secondary impact that excavated and redistributed crustal material? Was it variations in the cooling rate caused by external heat sources? Each explanation has supporting evidence and each has difficulties. The true answer may involve a combination of factors, or it may be something we have not yet considered. We do not know if the ancient stories of a time before the Moon contain any kernel of truth. The scientific consensus is clear. The Moon is billions of years old, present since long before humans existed. The myths describing a pre-lunar era cannot be literal accounts, because there was no one present to witness such a time. And yet, the stories persist across cultures and continents. The Proselenes of Greece, the legends of South America, the African oral traditions, the Babylonian texts, all describing a world without the Moon. If these are not memories, what are they? Why would such similar stories emerge independently in so many places? Perhaps they are symbolic expressions of cultural beginnings, metaphors for a time before order was established. Perhaps they preserve distorted memories of some other celestial event, an asteroid impact or atmospheric phenomenon that temporarily obscured the Moon. Perhaps they are pure mythology, with no basis in observable events. Or perhaps there is something we do not understand about the Moon's history, some possibility we have not considered, because it falls outside the boundaries of current scientific thinking. This is the least likely explanation, but it cannot be entirely dismissed. Science has been wrong before, has had to revise fundamental assumptions when new evidence emerged. The Moon may yet hold surprises that challenge what we think we know. We do not know if the Moon's many coincidences, its perfect size and distance for creating eclipses, its stabilizing influence on Earth, its role in the development of life, are meaningful or merely fortuitous. This is perhaps the deepest uncertainty, the question that science is least equipped to answer, because it is not really a scientific question at all. Science can describe what is, but it struggles with questions of why things are one way rather than another. The fact that the moon is positioned precisely where it needs to be, to perform all the roles it performs, can be seen as remarkable luck, as evidence of fine-tuning in the universe, or as an inevitable selection effect where only worlds with such moons develop beings capable of asking the question. Each perspective has its logic. None can be proven correct to the exclusion of the others. We are left to choose based on philosophical inclination rather than empirical evidence, to decide for ourselves what kind of universe we think we inhabit. We do not know what future discoveries await us on the moon. Plans are being made for new missions, permanent lunar bases, expanded exploration of the far side and the polar regions. Each mission will bring new data, new observations, new opportunities to test our theories and refine our understanding. Perhaps we will find clear evidence that resolves the question of the moon's formation once and for all. Perhaps we will discover geological processes we did not anticipate, features that require new explanations. Perhaps we will find nothing unexpected, and the moon will gradually become fully understood, its mysteries dissolved by the patient accumulation of knowledge. Or perhaps the more we learn, the more mysteries we will uncover. Perhaps the moon is the kind of object that reveals new depths the closer we look, that always retains some essential unknowability, no matter how thoroughly we study it. There is value in not knowing, in maintaining an open relationship with mystery, rather than rushing to close every question with a definitive answer. The moon has been a companion to humanity throughout our entire history, present in our myths and dreams, our calendars and timekeeping, our art and poetry and spiritual practices. If we were to fully understand it, to reduce it entirely to equations and mechanisms, we might lose something important. Not knowledge, but wonder. Not information, but inspiration. The moon serves us well as an object of study, but it may serve us even better as an enduring mystery, a reminder that the universe contains more than we can fully grasp. This does not mean we should stop investigating. The pursuit of understanding is one of humanity's noblest endeavours, but it means we should hold our understanding lightly, acknowledging that every answer opens new questions, that every solved mystery reveals deeper mysteries beyond. The moon hangs in the sky, the same moon that has hung there for billions of years. It is the moon our ancestors knew, though they understood it differently. It is the moon our descendants will know, though they may understand it in ways we cannot yet imagine. What we do not know about the moon is, in many ways, as important as what we do know. The gaps in our understanding are not failures, but invitations, spaces where curiosity can flourish, where imagination can play, where the next generation of questions can take root. The moon keeps its secrets not because it is withholding them, but because some truths take time to reveal. Some questions require not just better instruments, but different ways of thinking. Some mysteries may be fundamentally inexhaustible, always offering more to discover no matter how deep we probe. And so, we continue to look up at the moon with a mixture of knowledge and uncertainty. We know its mass and its orbit, its composition and its history. We have walked on its surface and brought pieces of it home. We have mapped it in exquisite detail and studied it with every tool science can provide. But we do not know, not completely, not finally, what it is or why it is there. We do not know if its presence is accident or necessity or something else entirely. We do not know what other secrets it holds, waiting to be discovered by future explorers with better technology and perhaps different questions. The moon remains, in the end, what it has always been, a presence in our sky that is both known and unknown, familiar and strange, close enough to touch, and far enough to remain forever mysterious. And perhaps that is exactly as it should be. Chapter 12. Beneath the Quiet Light. There is a moment just after sunset when the day has released its hold, but the night has not yet fully arrived. In that liminal time, if the conditions are right, the moon appears, sometimes low on the horizon, pale and enormous, sometimes high overhead, sharp and bright against the deepening blue. It emerges into visibility like a thought surfacing from the depths of consciousness, suddenly present, though it was there all along. We have travelled far in this meditation, through questions of geometry and physics, through ancient stories and modern science, through spiritual symbolism and seismic mysteries. We have considered the moon from every angle we could find, examining its peculiarities, its perfect alignments, its role in shaping the world we know. And now, at the end of this long reflection, we return to something simple. The moon is there. It has always been there. And in its presence, there is something that transcends all the questions we have asked. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the moon is not any specific anomaly in its formation or structure. Perhaps it is simply the fact of its existence, the improbable gift of having such a companion in our sky. Most planets have no moons or tiny captured asteroids that barely deserve the name. Earth has the moon, large and luminous, perfectly positioned to create the phenomena we have explored. We could ask why endlessly. We could debate whether its presence is accident or design, coincidence or cosmic necessity. But there comes a point where the asking must give way to something else. Not answers, but acceptance. Not explanation, but experience. The moon is here. We are here. And between us exists a relationship that has shaped everything from the movement of tides to the structure of human consciousness. Think of all the nights throughout human history when people have looked up and seen the moon. Shepherds watching their flocks in ancient hills. Sailors navigating by its light across dark oceans. Lovers meeting in gardens, their faces touched by silver. Children lying in grass making stories about the shapes they see in its surface. Poets finding words for longing and beauty. Mystics sitting in meditation, using its steady presence as an anchor for their practice. The moon has been witness to all of it. Every human joy and sorrow, every moment of fear and hope, every quiet evening and restless night. It has watched empires rise and fall, languages born and forgotten, technologies develop from fire to spacecraft. It has remained constant through all the changes below, turning its patient circle around our world. There is comfort in this constancy, in knowing that the same moon that lights your window tonight is the moon that lit windows for people who lived 1,000 years ago, who will live 1,000 years from now. The faces change, the cities change, the very shape of coastlines changes. But the moon endures, reliable and familiar, a point of continuity across the generations. We have spoken of the moon's influence on Earth, on tides and climate, on the stability that allows life to flourish. But there is another kind of influence, harder to measure but no less real. The moon influences human imagination, calls forth poetry and story, invites contemplation of our place in the cosmos. Without the moon, would we have wondered as much about the sky? Would we have developed astronomy with the same urgency, the same fascination? The stars are beautiful but distant, unchanging on human timescales. The moon is close enough to see detail, variable enough to demand attention. It teaches us that celestial objects are not fixed and eternal, but dynamic, following patterns we can learn to predict. The moon gave us a way to understand time beyond the day. It gave us eclipses to marvel at, tides to study, phases to track. It gave us something to reach for when we finally developed the technology to leave Earth. Apollo did not go to Mars or Venus but to the moon, the familiar companion that was close enough to seem possible. In this sense, the moon has been a teacher, guiding humanity's development in ways both practical and profound. It has drawn our eyes upward, encouraged our curiosity, rewarded our attention with patterns we could decode and use. If the moon is strange, if its characteristics are improbable, if its placement seems almost too perfect, perhaps that strangeness is itself meaningful. Not as evidence of artificial construction or divine intervention, but as a reminder that the universe is more interesting than we often imagine. That reality contains elegance and coincidence, patterns that emerge naturally but seem designed. That we live in a cosmos capable of producing not just stars and planets, but relationships between objects that are genuinely surprising. The moon does not need to be artificial to be extraordinary. It does not need to be placed by intelligence to be worthy of wonder. Its natural existence, if that is what it is, may be miracle enough. On clear nights, when the moon is full or nearly so, there is a quality to its light that sunlight never has. It is soft, diffuse, somehow gentle on the eyes and mind. Things seen by moonlight have a dreamlike quality, their colours muted, their edges blurred. Shadows become deeper, mysteries more tangible. The world transforms into something slightly other than itself, more magical, more open to imagination. This quality has nothing to do with the moon's origin or composition. It is simply the nature of reflected light, filtered through atmosphere, arriving at Earth with less intensity than direct sunlight. But the effect on consciousness is real. Moonlight invites a different kind of awareness, quieter and more contemplative than daylight consciousness. Perhaps this is part of the moon's gift to us. Not just the physical benefits of tidal forces and climate stability, but the invitation to experience a different quality of light, to know night not as the absence of day but as its own presence, illuminated gently by the moon's reflected radiance. The questions we have explored in this long meditation may never be fully answered. The moon may keep its deepest secrets indefinitely, or reveal them only slowly across centuries of patient investigation. We may never know with certainty how it formed, why it is positioned as it is, whether its many coincidences carry any meaning beyond themselves. But perhaps that is not a failure. Perhaps mystery serves a purpose, keeps us curious, keeps us looking upward, keeps us humble in the face of a universe that exceeds our understanding. The moon has been many things to humanity: timekeeper, muse, destination, symbol, companion. It has meant different things to different cultures, inspired contradictory stories and interpretations, and yet through all these variations it remains itself, a world of stone and dust scarred by impacts marked by ancient lava flows, turning its silent orbit around our planet. Tonight, wherever you are, the moon is somewhere in its cycle, perhaps waxing toward fullness, gaining light night by night, perhaps waning, releasing what it held, making space for renewal, perhaps hidden entirely in its new phase, present but invisible, gathering strength for its return. Whatever phase it occupies, it is there, pulling gently at the oceans, stabilizing the Earth's tilt, reflecting sunlight down through the darkness, doing what it has done for billions of years, what it will continue to do for billions more. You do not need to understand the moon to appreciate it. You do not need to solve its mysteries to feel its presence. You need only look up when the opportunity arises, when the clouds part and the moon appears, and allow yourself a moment of simple recognition. There it is, the ancient companion, the silver light in the darkness, the question that has no single answer, because it is too rich, too complex, too woven into the fabric of existence to be reduced to any one explanation. We began this journey by observing that the moon has never quite settled into the background of human awareness, that there is something about it that continues to call our attention, generation after generation, despite our familiarity with its presence. Now, having explored its mysteries from every angle we could find, we can perhaps understand why. The moon is ordinary and extraordinary at once, close enough to seem familiar, strange enough to remain compelling, old enough to have witnessed the entire history of life on Earth, yet still capable of surprising us with new revelations, scientifically explainable in broad terms, yet resistant to complete understanding in its specifics. It is, in other words, a perfect companion for creatures like us, beings who stand between the known and the unknown, who possess both scientific understanding and spiritual yearning, who seek answers while cherishing questions. The moon will be there tomorrow night, and the night after, continuing its patient journey across the sky. It will be there when you have forgotten this meditation, when these words have faded from memory. It will be there when everyone who hears these words has passed into history, when new generations look up with their own questions and interpretations. The moon endures, it witnesses, it reflects light into darkness, it pulls at the waters of Earth and the tides of human imagination. It keeps turning, always showing us the same face, keeping the other forever hidden, as if holding something back, preserving some final mystery that can never be fully revealed. Rest now beneath the quiet light. Let the questions drift away like clouds passing across the moon's face. You do not need to solve the mystery of the moon tonight, or any night. You need only acknowledge it, appreciate it, allow it to be what it is, a presence in the sky, a companion on our journey through space, a source of light and wonder and endless contemplation. The moon asks nothing of us except to notice it, to let its light touch our faces, to remember that we are part of something larger than ourselves. A cosmic arrangement of Earth and moon and sun, dancing together through space, creating the conditions for life, consciousness, and wonder to emerge. Somewhere above you now, whether you can see it or not, the moon turns. ancient and patient, familiar and mysterious, known and unknown. Let it be there, in all its strangeness and beauty. Let it keep its secrets if it must. Let it remain what it has always been. The moon, our moon, hanging in the darkness, casting its quiet light across a world that would be unimaginably different without it. Beneath the quiet light, all questions fade to peace. The moon continues its eternal circle, and we, blessed to witness it, drift into dreams beneath its silver gaze.